There are two things you need to know right now. The first is that on January 11th, 2023, just outside Magnolia, Texas, a 21-year-old woman named Angie Diaz was found dead. Not just dead, mutilated. The second is that her husband, the man who shared that cabin with her, the man who had stood at an altar and made her a promise just 3 months earlier, was caught on surveillance camera hours after her murder, casually walking into the store where she worked, grabbing himself a beer, and drinking it alone in the parking lot. What you are about to hear is not just a story about a brutal crime. It is a story about a young woman who crossed an entire continent chasing a better life, who poured every bit of herself into building something real, only to have it destroyed in one morning by the very person who was supposed to protect her. This is the story of Angie Diaz, and it is one of the most sinister cases to ever come out of Waller County, Texas. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Magnolia, Texas sits about 45 miles northwest of downtown Houston. It is named for the beautiful magnolia trees that line its roads, a small and relatively peaceful community where violent crime is rare enough that when it does happen, the entire county feels it. The Diaz family lived on a rural property on Oak Hollow Boulevard, south of FM 1488, in that quiet wooded stretch of Waller County where neighbors know each other and life moves slowly. Rodney and Lynn Diaz had 2 sons, Wayne, who was 25, and Jared, who was 21. Behind the main house on the property sat a small separate cabin. That was where Jared lived. And starting in October 2022, it was where Jared and his new wife Angie Diaz lived together. From the outside, from the social media posts and the wedding photographs, it looked like a beginning. 2 young people, both 21, both at the start of everything. But beginnings can be deceptive. And what was brewing inside that cabin was anything but a love story. Angie Diaz had come to the United States from Nicaragua as a young woman with relentless ambition. She took a job as a cashier at Cheap's Meat Market in Waller County, sent money back home to her family, and threw herself into building a life from scratch. Her co-workers adored her. Her boss Ruth Armendariz described her as bright, hardworking, and full of warmth. Customers remembered her smile. She was the kind of person who lit up whatever room she walked into, and she was doing it in a country that was not yet her own, in a language she was still perfecting, in a job that was just the beginning of what she planned to achieve. She was a young woman in full motion. And then she met Jared Diaz. Jared had attended Waller High School, played varsity football, and worked as an electrician. He came across as responsible, grounded, and charming. When he started showing up at Cheap's to see Angie, he brought roses. He was attentive and expressive in a way that felt romantic rather than suffocating, at least at first. The two began dating, and the relationship accelerated quickly. In October 2022, the same month Angie turned 21, she and Jared were married in a ceremony officiated by Waller County Judge Trey Duhan. The judge posted a photograph of the couple on Facebook shortly afterward. They were smiling. They looked like people at the very start of something good. They were not. Almost immediately after the wedding, the people around Angie began to notice that something had shifted. Not in her energy, which remained as warm and determined as ever when she was at work, but in something underneath it. A new kind of nervousness that had not been there before. A tightness behind her eyes. Jared began appearing at the meat market counter with a frequency that her coworkers found unsettling. He was not stopping in to say hello. He was checking on her, monitoring her, making sure she was where she was supposed to be. Friends who socialized with both of them noticed that when the conversation around Jared turned to Spanish, which it naturally did, since most of Angie's close friends spoke Spanish, he would grow visibly irritated. He could not follow the language, and rather than trying to connect, he would shut down completely and sometimes leave without a word of explanation. Among themselves, Angie's friends gave him a nickname. They called him Rojo, red, for his hair. He never knew. And the distance that nickname represented was already becoming something much more dangerous than a language barrier. In November 2022, just weeks after the wedding, Jared was arrested for driving while intoxicated. That alone might have been dismissed as a young man making a foolish choice. But what followed the arrest was harder to explain away. According to court records, Jared was aggressive and combative in custody. He threatened the arresting officer. He threatened jail staff. He punched windows. He had to be physically restrained in a chair just so that authorities could collect a blood sample. The man who had stood at that altar with roses and a smile was somewhere underneath all of that. But what was rising to the surface in his absence was something much uglier. He was released on bond and went back home. Back to the cabin. Back to Angie. Then came January 8th, 2023, 3 days before Angie's murder. Just before midnight, the Waller County 911 dispatch center received a call. It was Jared. He was barely coherent. He told the dispatcher he had taken some drugs and did not feel well. When paramedics arrived at the property, they found him in a state consistent with methamphetamine use. This was the drug that had consumed his older brother Wayne for years, the same drug the family had watched tear Wayne apart across multiple arrests dating back to 2018. Jared's parents had believed he was different. He was the responsible son. He was the one who had not gone down that path. He had even called the police on Wayne once when Wayne stole copper wire from him. And now here he was, hooked up to a gurney, coming down off meth, 3 days before his wife would be found dead. His mother Lynn later said that when Jared told them he had been using, it broke her heart completely. His father Rodney echoed that, saying they had been through this with Wayne and it was horrible and awful, and now the son who was supposed to be okay had walked right into the same darkness. That Sunday night, January 8th, was not just the night of the 911 call. It was also the night that Angie Diaz told her co-workers, 2 days later when she came into work, that she had been unable to sleep. She said she and Jared had been arguing all through that night. She said that when she stepped out of the shower, he had assaulted her. The reason he gave her for the assault was that she had gone out with her aunt earlier that day. He had not wanted her to go. He did not want her having a life outside of his control. She had gone anyway, and he had hit her for it. On January 10th, the day before her murder, Angie came into Chiefs. She arrived between 1 and 1:30 in the afternoon, and the moment her co-workers saw her they knew something was deeply wrong. She looked exhausted, hollowed out. Her boss pulled her aside. A co-worker named Erica was nearby. Angie lifted her shirt slightly and showed them a bruise on her shoulder. She did not need to say much, but she said the words anyway. She told them she was leaving Jared, that she was done, that she would never get married again. She said she had not been allowed to sleep. She said the argument had turned physical. Her co-worker asked her, "Is it really that bad?" And Angie said yes. She wanted to say more, but the register kept her busy, and customers were always within earshot. She arranged to meet her co-worker for coffee that coming Friday, January 13th, on her day off. There she planned to say everything she had not been able to say at work. That Friday would never come for Angie Diaz. Continuing from where it left off, with Anggy replaced by Angie, and nothing else changed. What happened in the early hours of January 11th, 2023, inside that cabin on Oak Hollow Boulevard began to piece itself together through forensic evidence, the statements of first responders, and eventually through Jared's own words during a police interrogation that is as chilling as anything you will find in a true crime case. Jared returned home from work at around 4 in the morning. Angie was awake when he arrived. They talked. At some point the talking ended. At some point the violence began. What followed was an attack so brutal that even hardened law enforcement professionals had to pause at the threshold of that front door before they could bring themselves to step inside. Waller County deputies arrived on scene after Jared's parents placed the 911 call around midday.
Waller County 911.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Rodney Doctors. I need an ambulance and police at so-called Boulevard.
Okay, what's going on?
I don't know everything, but my son's wife is dead. Please.
Okay. Okay, what is your name, sir?
My name is Rodney.
All information we have right now is...
Okay, and you said this is who to you now?
She's my daughter-in-law. She's my daughter-in-law.
Deputies followed a trail of bloody footprints from the main room into the bathroom. What they found there would be described in court filings and press reports in the starkest possible terms. Angie's severed head had been placed in the bathtub. The floor of the main room was saturated with blood. Blood-stained clothing was scattered across the space. Cigarette butts littered the area around the body. The murder weapon, a blood-stained kitchen knife, lay near Angie's body. She had suffered multiple stab wounds to her back in addition to the decapitation. The medical examiner would later determine that the stab wounds had come before the decapitation. She had been alive when the stabbing began. The scene suggested a sustained, escalating attack rather than a single explosive moment. This was not an accident. This was not a split-second loss of control. This was deliberate. Jared's parents had found him inside the cabin when they arrived. He was on the floor. He was crying. When deputies took him outside and placed him in the back of a patrol car, what they observed was a young man who appeared distressed, but who was also, in certain moments, strangely calm. His father, Rodney, still shaking on the 911 call, had said something that would linger. He told dispatchers he had tried to keep Jared in the hospital after the meth incident just days before. He had known something was wrong. He had felt it, but he had not known what form it would take. While his wife's body was still inside that cabin, while her blood was still wet on the floor, Jared Dicus had spent his morning doing something that tells you everything you need to know about his state of mind. Surveillance footage retrieved by investigators showed that at approximately 11:40 in the morning, hours after killing Angie, hours before his parents discovered her body, Jared drove to Cheap's Meat Market, the store where Angie worked, the place where they had first met. He walked past the counter without stopping, reached into the refrigerator section, pulled out a beer, and walked straight back out without paying. He opened it in the parking lot. He drank it. He got back into his vehicle and drove away. His wife was lying headless on the floor of their home, and he was stealing a beer from her workplace. If there was ever a single image that collapsed the story of a drug-induced psychotic break, it was that one. That was not a man who did not know what he had done. That was a man who had done it, processed it on some level, and moved forward as if the morning were his to do with as he pleased. When investigators sat down with Jared in the interrogation room, the interview that followed was one of the most disturbing on record from this case. He was not immediately cooperative. He was evasive and inconsistent. At one point, he referenced a voice, something he said had come to him through his television screen, that had told him to do what he did. He spoke about it in fragmented, almost theatrical terms, as if he were trying on the explanation to see how it fit. Investigators pressed him directly. Did you do it? He went silent for long stretches. His body language was tight, controlled, and calculating even as he tried to perform distress. He told them he had lost his way with God. He said he was sorry in vague, sweeping terms that refused to land on anything specific. One of the lead investigators leaned forward and told him plainly, "Your opportunity to look like a good guy, to say what I did and I am sorry, that door is closing on you." And in response, Jared made a clumsy, almost laughable attempt to deny it. Then he caught himself, and he laughed, not a nervous laugh, a laugh that acknowledged the absurdity of his own denial, a laugh at his own situation, a laugh that made the room colder. Then he began to talk. He confirmed that Angie had been awake when he got home from work. He said they had talked. He admitted that at some point during what followed, Angie had grabbed the knife. Investigators believe she grabbed it in self-defense, recognizing the danger she was in and reaching for the only thing available. A decision born of terror. And then that same knife, the one she grabbed to protect herself, was taken from her and used against her. Jared admitted to the stabbings. He admitted to the decapitation. When asked why he had placed her head in the bathtub, he said her hair was wet. He said he had turned on the shower. He was cleaning up. He was thinking about evidence. He was thinking about next steps. He was not in a fugue state. He was not dissociated. He was present and deliberate even as he insisted to interrogators that some external force had compelled him. Investigators asked him directly, "If a voice told you to kill your wife, why didn't that same voice tell you to hurt your parents when you went to their house afterward?" He had no answer. Because there was no answer. Because the voice was a story, and the story was falling apart. Investigators asked him if he had planned to hurt his parents. He said no. They pressed him, "So you could control yourself around them. You chose not to hurt them. Why couldn't you make that same choice with Angie?" Again, silence. Again, no answer. What his own responses revealed was a man who had exercised tremendous control over when and where his violence landed. That is not a psychotic break. That is a choice. What had pushed him to that choice on the morning of January 11th may never be fully known. The toxicology results that came back during the investigation showed that Jared tested positive for cocaine and marijuana at the time of his arrest, though not for methamphetamine as initially suspected based on the January 8th incident. The combination of substances, the escalating volatility of the relationship, the fact that Angie had told people she was leaving him, and his well-documented pattern of jealousy and controlling behavior all point toward a man who had decided that if he could not have her, he would make certain no one else could either. The rushed marriage, the monitoring, the showing up at her workplace, the assault after she spent time with her aunt. These were not random outbursts. They were a pattern. And patterns in domestic violence cases do not resolve on their own. They escalate. And this one escalated to its most catastrophic possible conclusion. The community response to Angie's death was immediate and overwhelming. Cheap's Meat Market became a gathering point for those who had known her. Her bicycle, which she had ridden to work each day, was placed at the center of a candlelight vigil. Her aunt, the woman who had helped raise her and who had been battling cancer while Angie sent money home for her treatments, spoke at the memorial and said Angie was an angel sent by God who touched everyone she met with a contagious joy and smile. She said those who had known her would forever carry a piece of her. Angie's mother, who had come to the United States to build a better life and had brought Angie here to share in it, was now left to navigate the unbearable. The family said they had no room for hate in their hearts. That extraordinary grace, given what had been taken from them, says more about the Diaz family than any words in this script could. Jared James Dicus was charged with first-degree murder. During the legal proceedings that followed, the question of his mental competency became central to the case. A court-ordered psychological evaluation was conducted, and the finding was unambiguous. Jared Dicus was competent to stand trial. Whatever his state of mind had been in the hours surrounding the murder, he understood the charges against him, he understood the proceedings, and he was capable of participating in his own defense. Faced with that determination, and with the weight of forensic evidence, witness testimony, and his own statements in the interrogation room, Jared entered a guilty plea. As part of his plea agreement, he waived all rights to appeal the verdict. In August 2024, he was sentenced to 40 years in prison and transferred into the Texas Department of Criminal Justice System to begin serving that sentence. But the case did not end there. In January 2026, almost exactly 3 years after Angie's murder, Jared Dicus was found dead inside his cell at the Wainwright Unit in Anderson County, Texas. He had died by suicide. He was 24 years old. He had spent less than 2 years of his 40-year sentence behind bars. For Angie's family and the community that had gathered around her memory, this outcome brought no closure. Closure is a word that gets used a great deal in true crime coverage, but rarely reflects the reality of what families actually experience. What Angie's family experienced was the loss of a 21-year-old woman who had come to the United States with nothing but ambition and heart, who had built something real from scratch, who had friends who loved her and a smile that people still talk about, and who died in the most violent and undignified way imaginable at the hands of someone she had trusted with her life. The fact that Jared Dicus is also now dead does not give that back. It does not restore what was taken. It simply means that the story ends without a reckoning, without a sentence fully served, without any real accounting for what he did to her. What this case should make palpable, what it should leave you sitting with, is not just the horror of the crime scene or the chilling footage of a man stealing a beer from his dead wife's workplace. It should leave you with an understanding of how patterns of controlling behavior, escalating violence, and unchecked substance abuse build toward catastrophe. Angie told her co-workers she was leaving. She had a plan. She had arranged coffee for Friday. She was trying to get out. She had not yet made it out of Tuesday. In domestic violence situations, the most dangerous moment for a victim is not when the relationship is at its worst. It is when they try to leave. The statistics on this are consistent and brutal. Angie Diaz became one of those statistics, and she deserved so much better than that. She deserved the accounting degree she had been working toward. She deserved the career she was mapping out. She deserved the Friday coffee she never got to have. She deserved the life she was building with her own 2 hands, with her own sweat and sacrifice, in a country that was still becoming hers. Instead, she got 3 months of marriage, a bruise she showed her coworkers, a plan to leave that she did not survive, and a candlelight vigil with her bicycle at the center of it. Her family says it is not a goodbye. They say it is a see you later. And if there is any grace to be found in a story this devastating, maybe that is it. Angie Diaz was real. She was loved. She is remembered. And stories like hers matter. Not because they are entertaining, not because the crime is dramatic, but because understanding how they happen is the only way we ever get closer to stopping them. If Angie's story stayed with you, don't let it end here. Like this video so more people can hear her story, because stories like this deserve to be seen, remembered, and never ignored. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want more real, in-depth cases like this, the kind that go beyond headlines and into what really happened. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next case.